Hey guys, we're going to be setting up our Prisma server for our e-commerce app. Now if you haven't already, make sure you install Prisma on your computer. You can do so with npm with this command right here. Now I already have it installed on my computer, so I'm not going to run that. And the first thing I'm going to do is create an empty folder to start the project. So I'm going to call it e-commerce, and then I'm just going to cd into there. So you want to make sure the folder is empty because we're going to run Prisma init inside of it. And Prisma init will initialize the project, and notice how I put a little dot on the end that says I want to initialize in the current directory. Okay, so it gives us a choice. We're going to choose the full stack boilerplate. The other one is if you don't want to set up a JavaScript server yourself. Here we have a couple different choices of the boilerplate to choose from. I'm going to choose TypeScript, but feel free to choose Node if you're more comfortable with that. We could have also chose React, but we're using React Native, so this won't really help us as much. Now we have a choice between basic and advanced. We want to do authentication in our app, so I'm going to choose this one because it has some of the authentication things already set up for us. Now we could have chose the other one and add authentication ourselves, but this boilerplate does authentication in a way that I like and have done very similar before, so we're just going to use this. Now it's going to install all of the JavaScript dependencies that we need, and then as you can see it runs Prisma Deploy. So it's going to create a Prisma server and also the MySQL database. And you have to choose where you want this to run. If you have Docker installed on your computer, you can run it locally, which is what I'm going to do. But feel free, if you don't have Docker or you don't want to install Docker, you can use there's two public development clusters that Prisma has that you can use. But I'm going to click local and run it there. So this is where it's going to set up the MySQL database and the Prisma server that it uses. So it's going to be running locally on my computer using Docker. Okay, so this is all done and good. And it doesn't tell me where my URL is. So if you don't see that, what you can do is you can run Prisma Info, and it tells you, hey, we're running the cluster. So here it's running the local cluster, and here's where it's running. So we could click on this URL and go to it right now if we wanted to, and we'd be able to play around in the GraphQL playground. But you might get a little authentication error, which we'll be discussing in a little bit in the future, because you have to set a header. But I'm going to open up this code in Visual Studio Code and take a look at it. Now I mentioned we had clicked the authentication boilerplate, so I want to talk to you guys how this is set up and what came with it, how the authentication is working, because we don't actually need to do much after this. So right here they have set up a GraphQL Yoga server. That's what this thing is, and then you'll notice it is grabbing its resolvers from this folder called resolvers, which is over here. And this resolver folder is where all the basically work is done for the schema.graphql, so the implementation of all these things. And now you'll notice there's already a sign up and a login for us, so that's really nice. And we have a auth payload where we can grab the user and the token. And if you've watched some of my stuff in the past, you know I use a refresh token and a regular token. But I'm going to just use a token to follow along with these guys, and it's very similar way of doing it with just a singular token. And let's see how they actually do this. So how do they log a user in, right? So let's look at the mutations and then auth. So for login, what they do, I guess we should start with sign up because that's kind of the first thing you do. So if the account doesn't exist, they are hashing the password using bcrypt. If you don't know what that means, you don't want to store the password as just, if my password is Bob, you don't want to just store the password in the database as Bob, because if the database gets hacked, then everyone knows your password. So instead you hash it into basically a random string. So we store a random string in the database, and then we're creating the user right here. And then what they're returning is a JWT token. So they're using a JSON Web Token library right here to do this, and they are passing in the user ID. This is important. So this is how we're going to do authentication. The user, or what they're going to do is they're going to have a React Native app. They're going to store this JWT token, so when they come back to our app, we know who they are because we are storing the user ID and this JWT token that they have. and they are signing this token with the app secret, and this app secret is in the .env file, so we can see this is my app secret right here. You don't want to share this with people, but this is just development, and you can see these are crappy secrets. You'd want to share them, or you want to change them when going into production anyway. Okay, so that's how you create a user, right? Or sign up. So you give them a token back and you create a user in the database. And then log in, you're just verifying that their password matches. So we use bcrypt to check against the hashed password right here. And of course, we are checking who the user is based on the email that they give us. And they're throwing an error if the email doesn't exist. We're going to do this slightly differently because I like to do errors with login slightly differently, but this works fine too. And then they're doing await bcrypt, and they're using async and await, which is nice. And then right here they're just checking the password to make sure it's correct, and they're giving a token back like before. So that's how they're doing auth. And now on the side over here they have auth payload isn't really important, but in their utils they have this get user ID. So what they're doing is they're grabbing the authorization header. So on the React Native app, what we're going to do is whenever we make a request, we're going to pass the JWT token that they gave us as a request header. So here they're grabbing that token that we passed them, and they're checking to make sure a token exists, and they use the word bear in front of it, so they're replacing that out. And then here you can see they're just verifying that the JWT token is correct by checking the app secret. And if it is correct, we know that the user ID is stored inside of there. So now this is how they're getting the user ID. And we're going to be using this function, and they use this function, I believe, like when they're creating a post right here. So you know, or creating a draft, you know who the user is who's actually making these requests based on the token that they're using. So that's the auth that they have set up, and it's pretty nice. We're going to be using that. And the database over here, we can see they already have a post and user set up. We're going to be using the user, and I wanted to show you guys something real quick. So notice how there's a type user in the database. This is what the database model is, but we wouldn't want to return a password back to a user, right? We only really want to store this in the database. So this is like a database only field. So in our schema.graphql, you'll notice that they actually create another user type over here, but without the password, because you'd never want to return the password back to a user. So this is a practice that seems like happens when using Prisma, when you don't want the user type over here, like some of these fields you don't want to show back to the user. But you notice like type post, I believe, they do this. See how they have the type post, and they're grabbing that. You can see it's commented out, but they are grabbing the post type that they use in their model over here. So we're going to create a new model ourselves. I'm going to go ahead and keep the code that they have for post in case we need something to go off of. If we're having trouble or we don't know how to do something, we can see how they're doing with post instead of just deleting it all right now. But when we get further down the line, we'll go ahead and delete post. So I'm going to create a type called product, and this is going to be basically our main thing. So I'm going to keep this super bare bones. I'm going to have a name, which is going to be a string, and it cannot be null, so that's why I'm using a bang sign at the end. I'm going to have a picture URL, which is also going to be a string. We'll make the picture mandatory as well. And then lastly, I'm going to have a price. So we're going to make the price a float, and that's going to be mandatory. So this is going to be what a product looks like. Feel free to add more fields to this if you'd like description or whatnot. Now we might want to know like who the owner of this product is, right? So we can make a field called seller, so the person who's selling this product, and have it point back to a user up here. And we're going to create this or make this a mandatory field as well. So you have to create a product, you have to be a user, and we have to know who your user is. So we have the person who's selling the product. And then maybe from the user's point of view, we'd like to see all the products that they sell. So for example, products. And then that's going to return an array of product. And I don't know if I have to like move this up. No, I don't have to. For a second I didn't think, I wasn't sure if I need to move type above here because we're referencing product, but then I saw the referencing user and type is above. But yeah, don't worry about that. So anyway, now we have our product set up. So whenever you make a change to this data model.graphql file, you need to actually change what your database looks like, because now we want our database to sync up with what this file looks like. So you can open up a terminal, and I'm in the same folder, e-commerce, and I just run Prisma Deploy. So what that will do, it'll take your code here, check it against what is deployed, and if anything's different, it'll create fields in the database. So take a look here, it shows us all the changes that were made. So it created a new product, and I actually should have added these as fields because we're going to want them. We're going to want an ID created at, updated at, so we're going to copy that, paste it down here as well. I forgot to add those. Those are good fields, so they add it automatically for us. So this is all good, and then notice how it sets up a relationship with the user, right? Because this is database stuff, but you need to set up a user in the database for these two to be related to each other. Okay, I'm going to save that. I'm actually not sure, since I added fields that are already in there, if I run Prisma Deploy, if that's necessary, but I'm going to run it again just in case. Looks like it's updating them, but it should update to be the same thing anyway. Okay, so good. So now we're synced up and we have this product on our Prisma server, and we have authentication already done for us thanks to Prisma's boilerplate. What we're going to do next is set up the React Native app, and then we're going to start making requests, create a sign up and a login page since the mutations are already done. But that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.